Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to take a deep dive into President Trump's executive order to freeze funding for a whole bunch of federal programs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah.
And we've got some excerpts from a recent Al Jazeera article
Great.
that gives us the rundown on this whole situation.
Sounds good.
So we're going to unpack the potential impact of this freeze, explore the different perspectives, and hopefully help you understand what's at stake.
Okay, great.
So to start off,
Yeah.
I mean, this order, it's pretty wide-reaching, right?
It is, yeah. It's interesting to see just how wide-reaching this order is. It covers foreign aid, funding for
GOs, for people who don't know.
yeah, those are non-governmental organizations.
Right.
And even grants that have already been awarded.
Wow. So this freeze, it doesn't seem to be pulling any punches.
No, no.
I mean, are there any exceptions to this?
There are some things that aren't affected.
Okay.
So Social Security,
Okay.
Medicare,
Got it.
and direct assistance to individuals,
Mm-hmm.
like some food aid programs.
Okay.
Those are all safe
So some essential programs are protected, at least for now.
for now.
Yeah, okay. So
Yeah.
foreign aid, non-governmental organizations, grants that have already been awarded,
Mm-hmm.
but things like Social Security, Medicare, direct assistance,
Right.
those are safe.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that seems a little bit inconsistent, no.
Yeah, it does raise questions about the criteria for these exemptions.
Yeah.
And you're right, the potential consequences are definitely concerning.
Mm.
The article mentions that trillions of dollars are potentially affected.
Trillions, wow. I
Yeah.
mean, so what does that even mean?
Well, we're talking about, all sorts of things.
Like what?
Research on cures for childhood cancer potentially being halted.
Oh, wow.
Food assistance programs facing disruptions.
Jeez.
Reduced support for survivors of domestic violence.
That's terrible.
And even suicide hotlines being forced to shut down.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Those are some very serious consequences.
Mhm.
And actually, the article quotes Diane Yentel,
Okay.
the president of the National Council of Nonprofits.
Okay.
And she states that this freeze could have a devastating impact on hundreds of thousands of organizations that rely on these grants.
Wow. That quote really highlights the human cost of this decision. This
Right.
isn't just about numbers on a budget sheet.
Right.
These cuts would affect real people who depend on these programs.
Yeah. Real people with real lives. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I guess the question then is like, what's the Trump administration's reasoning behind this?
Well, the administration argues that it's about making sure that federal funding aligns with President Trump's priorities.
Okay.
And one of those priorities highlighted in the article is a crackdown on DEI initiatives.
DEI, for folks who don't know.
That stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay. Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So they're saying these programs are not really in line with that focus.
That's what they're saying.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
But you know what's interesting is the article mentions that 4 groups filed a lawsuit.
Oh, wow.
That resulted in a temporary block of the funding freeze by U.S. District Judge Lauren Alicon.
Oh.
And these 4 groups include nonprofits, public health professionals,
Right.
and small businesses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then on top of that, a number of Democratic state attorneys general are also preparing legal challenges.
It sounds like there's a lot of pushback.
Yeah, I mean, there's some strong feelings about this.
Yeah.
And the article actually quotes New York Attorney General Letitia James,
Okay.
who called the move unconstitutional
Wow.
and stated her intention to fight it in court.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then you also have, like, we're seeing the impact on the ground.
Oh.
The article mentions Congressman Maxwell Alejandro Frost,
Mm-hmm.
said his team was already getting calls from organizations being cut off from funding even before the freeze was officially supposed to begin.
So even before it was supposed to start.
Yeah, he mentioned impacts on housing programs,
Oh, wow.
homeless services. Yeah, and even public safety.
That's concerning.
Yeah, it seems like it's already having an effect, even before it was supposed to start.
It does seem like the impact is being felt right away.
Yeah, and the article quotes White House spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt,
Okay.
who defended the order, stating that it's about being good stewards of taxpayer dollars.
So that's their justification.
Yeah, I mean, how do opponents of the freeze respond to that kind of justification?
Well, they argue that this freeze will actually harm communities and essential services.
Okay.
And ultimately cost taxpayers more in the long run.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So it seems like this freeze is kind of sparking a pretty heated debate.
It definitely is.
I mean, it's not just about budgets. It's
Yeah.
about...
It's about different visions for the role of government and the priorities of the nation.
And it seems like, I mean, with these legal challenges, it's going to be interesting to see how the courts weigh in.
Yeah, for sure.
So speaking of the legal challenges, it seems like this is kind of a textbook example of checks and balances in our government, right?
Exactly. This is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The Constitution gives Congress the power to control spending, but President Trump has often asserted that a president can withhold funds.
It's a bit of a power struggle.
It sounds like it, yeah,
And there's strong opinions on both sides.
definitely.
The article mentions Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer,
Okay.
who called the move lawless, destructive, and cruel.
Wow.
Yeah. And then on the other hand, you have Congressman Tom Emmer, a Republican, who said that this is President Trump fulfilling his campaign promises to shake things up in Washington.
So you've got these two very different perspectives
Two very different perspectives.
on what the role of the president should be.
Exactly.
Wow.
And it's important to remember that this funding freeze isn't happening in isolation.
You're right. This is part of a broader pattern of actions.
The article reminds us that President Trump has also taken steps like shuttering DEI programs,
Mm-hmm.
imposing a federal hiring freeze.
Okay.
And he's put a 90-day pause on foreign aid. But there were exceptions made for Israel and Egypt.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot of his actions kind of fall in line with this whole idea of, reducing government spending, changing priorities.
Mm.
And there's another detail in the article that I found pretty striking.
Okay.
The State Department has suspended funding for HIV, malaria, and tuberculosis drugs,
Oh, wow.
as well as medical supplies for newborns in countries that receive support from USAID.
Jeez.
And the article points out that the U.S. is the world's largest aid donor.
That's a significant point.
Yeah,
This freeze could potentially have ripple effects far beyond our borders.
right. It's not just contained to the U.S.
No, impacting the lives of vulnerable populations all around the globe.
And it kind of makes you think, what is America's role in global health?
Yeah, what is their responsibility?
Yeah, it's clearly more than just a budget issue here.
For sure.
It seems like this funding freeze is a power struggle with potentially far-reaching consequences.
Absolutely. We're seeing a clash of ideologies, a test of constitutional limits, and a potential impact that extends globally.
So I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
As we move into this deep dive, what are some things that our listeners should keep in mind?
Okay, well, first, this funding freeze goes beyond budget cuts.
Okay.
It really reflects a deeper ideological battle over the role of government, the allocation of resources, and the direction of the nation.
Got it.
Second, the legal challenges highlight the tension between presidential power and congressional authority, and the outcome could have really significant implications for the future.
Okay.
And finally, the potential consequences of this freeze are far-reaching,
Yeah.
with potential impacts on healthcare, social services, research, and international aid.
Wow, that's a great overview.
Okay, good.
So I think we've laid the groundwork,
Yeah,
and now it's time to sort of dig deeper.
let's get into it.
Let's get into some of the finer points of this situation and try to understand the nuances at play.
All right.
Let's do it.
Sounds good. It's easy to get kind of lost in all the political stuff and legal complexities of this whole thing.
Right.
But we can't forget about, the human impact.
Right.
This isn't just some policy debate. This is about people's lives.
Absolutely. Behind the headlines and court battles, these are real people whose lives are directly affected by this.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. You've got researchers who are working so hard to find cures for diseases.
Yeah.
Educators, they're providing essential services to children, social workers who are supporting vulnerable communities.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, everything's on hold. They don't know what the future looks like.
Right, what are they supposed to do?
And what about the families?
Yeah.
The families who depend on these programs for, basic stuff like healthcare, food assistance, housing support.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the ones who are going to feel this freeze the most.
And the article mentions that this is temporary.
Right.
But even a temporary disruption can have a lasting impact.
Absolutely. Think about it.
Yeah.
What happens to those research projects that are put on hold?
Right.
Can they really just pick up where they left off
Right.
once funding comes back?
Yeah.
And what about, like we said, families losing access to vital services?
Yeah.
Even if it's just a short-term disruption, that can have long-term consequences.
Totally. And this freeze is coming at a time when many communities are already really struggling.
It's true. The pandemic, the economic uncertainty, and social unrest. I mean,
it's already a lot.
it's taken a toll, and this
Yeah.
is just adding another layer.
It's like adding fuel to the fire.
Yeah, the people who are already most vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones that are going to be hit hardest.
Yeah, so how do we balance the administration's goal of reducing government spending
Mm-hmm.
with this need to support those who rely on these programs?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is, yeah.
How do we balance, fiscal responsibility with social responsibility.
Right.
I mean, it's a complex issue, no easy answers.
Yeah, and we need to consider the long-term cost of cutting these programs, too.
Right.
I mean, what if people lose access to healthcare or education or social services?
Mm-hmm.
Won't that end up costing taxpayers more in the long run?
Exactly. I mean, think about healthcare costs, if people can't even afford preventative care,
Right.
or the cost of addressing homelessness
Mhm.
if they lose access to housing assistance.
Right.
Sometimes you got to spend money to save money, right?
Right. Invest up front.
Yeah.
It's about looking, beyond just like the dollar amount.
Yeah,
And thinking about the larger societal impact.
precisely.
Okay.
It's about investing in our future, in our communities,
Yeah.
in our people.
Right. I mean, this whole article really highlights this contrast
Mm-hmm.
between, those who think this is a necessary step towards fiscal responsibility
Right.
and those who view it as like a direct attack on vital programs.
Yeah, it does seem like a microcosm of the bigger political and social divisions
It really does.
we're seeing in the country.
I mean, this deep dive, it's taking us through a whirlwind of information.
It really has.
We've explored all the legal stuff, the political battles, potential consequences.
Yeah.
But this is all really about understanding how government actions actually affect people.
And recognizing that we have a responsibility
Oh, yeah.
to stay informed, engage in critical thinking, and really just participate in the democratic process.
Right. We can't just sit back.
We can't be passive observers.
Yeah. We need to be active.
We need to demand more from our leaders.
Right. Demand accountability.
And advocate for policies that are actually good.
This funding freeze might be temporary,
Right.
but the impact could be much bigger.
It could be a wake-up call.
Yeah, like we need to pay attention.
Ask tough questions.
Yeah.
And demand better from our leaders.
So where do we even go from here?
Good question.
I mean, this is just one piece
Yeah,
of a much larger puzzle.
absolutely.
I mean, how do we even create a more equitable society? I mean, how do we make sure that everyone has access to the resources they need
Mm-hmm.
to thrive?
Yeah, those are the questions.
And how do we even begin to bridge the divide?
I think it starts with a willingness to listen to each other,
Okay.
understand different perspectives,
Yeah.
and recognize that, we're all in this together.
We are.
It's not us versus them. We
Right.
got to find solutions that benefit everyone.
I agree.
Mhm.
And this deep dive, it's taken us deep
Uh-huh.
into this whole funding freeze.
It has.
But it's also pushed us to think bigger, you know?
Yeah.
Consider the forces at play.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine a different kind of future.
It's been a good reminder that we're all connected. Our actions have consequences,
Yeah.
and that we actually have the power to make a difference.
And as we move forward, let's take that with us.
Please.
Let's be the change.
Yeah.
Let's create a future that's brighter and more just for everyone.
It starts with each of us,
Hmm?
the commitment to understanding,
Yeah.
compassion, and action.
Absolutely.
It starts with the belief that we can create a better world together.
This deep dive has been a journey.
It has.
And it's not over yet.
We've explored a lot
Yeah.
about this freeze.
We've gone deep.
But we've also uncovered some deeper truths about ourselves and our society.
It's true.
It's been a reminder that we're all connected,
Mm-hmm.
that we can make a difference.
And as we wrap up, let's just keep that in mind.
Okay.
Stay informed, engage in meaningful conversations,
Yeah.
and try to make a positive impact in our own communities.
Remember, change starts with each of us.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's really interesting how this deep dive's gone.
Yeah.
Like, we started off with this funding freeze,
Uh-huh.
but we've kind of ended up talking about, like, bigger issues.
It's true, yeah. The role of government, how federal money gets used,
Mm-hmm.
even America's place, in the world.
In the Al Jazeera article, it just lays out the facts.
Right.
It doesn't say, like, here's what you should think.
It lets everyone have their say.
Exactly. And that's what makes this deep dive so valuable, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you've done a great job showing all these different sides.
Well, thanks.
What the administration's thinking, the legal pushback, what people are actually experiencing.
Right. And it's up to our listener to decide what they think.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what we're hoping for.
Yeah.
We don't want to just tell people what to believe.
No.
We want to give them the info so they can figure it out themselves.
Right. Spark some curiosity.
Yeah, exactly.
Help people navigate this. It's complicated stuff.
And it's not over yet, right?
Oh, definitely not. I mean, the courts are still figuring things out,
Mhm.
and we don't even know the long-term effects of this freeze yet.
So this deep dive is really just the beginning.
It's a starting point.
We've given everyone the basics.
Yeah, the who, the what, the why.
But we really want you all to keep exploring this.
Go deeper. Look at the sources. Find different viewpoints.
Yeah. connected to your own life.
Exactly, because knowing stuff is only useful if actually use it.
So as we're racking up here,
Yeah.
what's like the one thing
Okay.
you want our listener to walk away with today?
That's a good question.
The takeaway nugget.
Well, with all this pushback, all these lawsuits, it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out.
Right.
Like, what does this mean for presidents in the future?
Oh, interesting.
Can they just do this whenever they want?
Right. Is this setting a precedent?
And what will that mean for, everyday people?
That's a great point.
These are things worth thinking about.
Definitely things worth thinking about.
Yeah.
This deep dive, man, it's been a whirlwind.
It has.
But hopefully everyone listening feels a little more, in the know.
Yeah.
Empowered to, stay informed,
Absolutely.
have good conversations, maybe even make a difference themselves.
That's what we hope for.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks for having me.